Hello everyone, my name is Melissa Smar, so thank you all for coming. This is LDS, Land Development Services Building Permits 101. We're going to go overview of what needs permits. We're going to talk about some contractor information as well. So the topics we're going to discuss today is why are building permits required, when are permits required, hiring a contractor, the permit process, and additional resources. So why are permits required? So the purpose of the Virginia Residential Code, which is for residential homes such as single-family dwellings and townhouses. Apartments and condos are under the Virginia Commercial Code because even though they're residential in use, it has to be under the Commercial Code because there's so many units in a smaller space. So that's why. And it's to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the people who are living in the structure as well as the structure itself. So that's basically why it's in existence. What does this mean to you as homeowners or potential homeowners? You want to protect your family. You obviously don't want a situation where you lose your home because of an electrical fire or the unfortunate incident in Prince William County 2 weeks ago where they had an explosion of a gas main. Again, the fire department wants to make sure that we're all safe. You want to protect the investment. You all spend a lot of money for houses in Fairfax County. We want to make sure that they're in fact safe and again protecting the investment. You want to avoid higher costs in the future. As we know from the pandemic, construction supplies became very expensive, more so than they did prior to the pandemic. And then as we've had inflation and other economic factors, it's going to make it more expensive. So the more you do today, the less money you may have to pay in the future. So again, that's another reason. And it's also required by law, as we discussed on the previous slide. So when are permits required? So I'm going to show these 6 pictures, and these pictures, 5 of them do require a permit. Does anyone want to venture to guess which of the 6 pictures would not require a permit? Oh no, if you're demoing a house, you have to have a permit, yes. So that's not that one. So it's actually the shed. The reason why is because it's on its size. So if a shed is less than 256 square feet or smaller, it does not require a building permit. If the shed is larger than 256 square feet, it needs a building permit. If this particular shed has electrical in it, it doesn't need a building permit, but it would need an electrical permit because you're tying electrical in. So that is why. The retaining wall needs a permit because obviously it's holding back earth and we need to make sure that it's structurally sound. Unfortunately, there have been cases where retaining walls have collapsed. And again, to protect the investment, we need to make sure that it's built, properly and to code. This is a finished basement. If you're finishing a basement, it requires a permit. It may need a building permit if you're structuring walls. Putting up drywall itself doesn't need a permit. But there are some basements where they're unfinished, and so it may require structural components to be done. And then in this case, it would need electrical, and then if you're adding a bathroom, it would need plumbing, okay? This is an addition. It would need a permit because, again, it's a new piece of the puzzle regarding your home, and so it needs a permit to be constructed. A demolition, like I said, the rule of thumb that we have here is if it needs a permit to be built, it needs a permit to come down. And then a deck, again, because it's a structural component, it is in fact required, it needs a permit. If you're resurfacing a deck, it does require a permit if it's new, if it's a full replacement, or if you're changing it from wood to, a lot of people are using Trex material for their decks, so that would need a permit. Anything related to the stairs or railing, if you're just replacing those items, that needs a permit because it is structural and it's needed in order to use the deck. Are there any questions about that? Yes, sir. Okay, so the question is, if he's dividing a room, does he need for a partition wall, does it need a permit? Yes, because if you're adding a wall, it needs a permit. Okay, and it may not be structural, so it may be a non-structural wall. Because you're adding a wall, it does need a permit. So the question is, if she has a deck or if someone has a deck and you're wanting to take it down, and it has a gas line for the gas grill. So to answer your question, yes, it needs a permit to be demolished. Depending on what you want to do with the gas line. If you're keeping the gas line, you don't need a permit. If you're basically removing that gas line, it needs a permit because we need to make sure that it's shut off properly.
And what kind of permit would that be?
So that could probably be a plumbing gas permit. Well, you're going to need some if the deck is above ground, even if it's like a couple of inches, it needs some type of railing. Because we can't have a trip hazard or a fall hazard. This deck here needs a permit because it's off the ground. Unless you have a patio, or there are a few decks in the county that are basically on grade, it needs a permit, but again, we need to know how it's structurally sound, because again, it's about making sure there's no fall hazard. If there are if it's a patio and there's stairs, the railing, the code says if the stairs are more than 3, the railing would need a permit. Or if it's egress. So we have some people who have patios, but it's a second egress for their home. That needs a permit because again, it is a safety feature because it has to have inspection. The easy answer to that question, and I'm not an inspector, but the easy answer to the question of retaining wall material, is there exceptions to that, correct, is what you asked me? Okay. And height. So if a wall is more than 4 feet in height, it requires a permit. If it is holding back less than 3 feet of earth, it does not need a permit. Anything over 4 feet is usually inspected by our critical structures folks, because again, there's some type of surcharge that is being held back. So, and material-wise, usually you're not going to use wood for anything that's holding a lot of surcharge, earth-wise, but again, as long as it's structurally sound, then we don't so much care about material as long as it's going to hold the surcharge. Okay, so his question is, for the basement example, if he's moving an outlet up or down, so moving it but not changing any wire, not moving any wire, or not adding any wire, correct? Okay, that's an in-kind, so yes, that would not need a permit. The exception to that is that if the outlet is being moved a far distance that requires you to add a wire, that needs a permit. Okay, and then you asked about the retaining wall too. So again, to repeat the question, if, for example, he is replacing the retaining wall or he's replacing the shed, like for like, does that need a permit or not? If the shed is over 256 square feet, the answer is no, you do not need a permit. If the sheds themselves, if they're less than 256 square feet and they're beside each other, technically not. Now, the other issue, which is not Land Development Services issue, is you have to go through a zoning review. And there are setbacks for the neighborhoods. So if you can fit 2 sheds on your lot and still maintain the the setback requirements, then yes, you can have 2 sheds beside each other.
Then you're going to need a...
Technically not, correct. Now, if you put electrical in, like I said, okay. Now, another item that I wanted to bring up is the roof. So if someone is reshingling a roof, to reshingle a roof does not require a permit. The only time a permit is required for a roof is if you're replacing 8 sheets of plywood or 256 square feet. Okay, because it's a structural component to the roof. On townhouses, if plywood is replaced, it does need a permit, even though, again, because most townhouses are connected. Again, we just want to make sure that it's in fact, it's all about safety. Okay? And no plans are needed for a roof permit. It's just that we need the permit. And then a lot of roofers do not know this. So if you happen to have a roof replacement needed, you need to make sure that if it's more than 256 square feet or 8 sheets of plywood, that they obtain a permit. Okay? Any questions? Okay. Good questions, by the way. Okay. So we have another thing here about if it can go boom, it needs a permit. So anything gas related, water heaters, furnaces, even if it's a like-for-like replacement, it needs a permit. Okay? If it decreases or increases in size, it needs a permit. Okay, so any gas-fueled appliance needs to have a permit even if it's replacing one that's already in existence. Fairfax County's Board of Supervisors have created 2 programs that last through October 31st of 2025, and that is solar power solar on your roof. There is no permit fee to install solar panels on your roof through October 31st of 2025, and also electric charging stations. There again, the county is trying to use less electric, and so they are offering, if people want to take advantage of installing of course you have to pay for the installation, but the permit fee would be waived, but a permit would still be required. So who can apply for a permit? A licensed contractor or subcontractor. Just want to give you a helpful hint that there are contractors out there that may not be able to obtain permits. So for example, I had a case where the homeowner paid $200,000 to this contractor, and he only had a painting designation on his license. So he couldn't get building, he couldn't get electrical, he couldn't get plumbing, or he couldn't get mechanical. The homeowner had no idea. The contractor obtained a permit in the homeowner's name, which is allowed, okay, because we don't check contracts. We only check if a contractor's name is entered in our PLUS system, which we'll get to in a bit. And the contractor checks the box, owner as contractor. That means the owner is ultimately responsible for the permit. So you want to have that conversation. We'll talk about how to look up a contractor's license in Virginia. Now this gentleman has to unfortunately sue the contractor because he got no inspections at all. He got a building permit but no inspections. He didn't get electrical, plumbing, or mechanical. So again, the reason why our department exists is because we're trying to protect the life, safety, and welfare of our community. Okay. An architect or engineer. Some people want to hire a professional. They also have to be licensed by the Department of Professional and Occupational Regulation. Again, I'll get to that here in a little bit. They can also apply for a permit on your behalf. The owner's agent with permit authorization. We have a customer experience team who sits on the 3rd floor currently, who helps people complete those forms, enters them, gets them uploaded into the PLUS system, and again, making sure that we know who's obtaining the permit. And then an owner or a tenant. We've had situations in the past where a homeowner has rented out their house to a tenant, and the tenant has decided to do work. And that is allowed. If I were a tenant, I would have a conversation with the homeowner, let him know what I'm doing, but it is allowed under the code. Any questions on these 4 entities that can apply for permits? Okay, moving on. Hiring a contractor. So what we have some tips here we want to give you. Again, it is up to you, but I deal with unlicensed contractor complaints, so I have a little bit of experience in this arena. Number 1, you want to indicate their responsibility for the work. Some contractors don't want to get the permits because they don't feel that they are required, even though they are by code. We have had contractors tell homeowners that they don't have to get permits, or that it's easier for the homeowner to obtain the permit because it's less red tape. Okay? There are contractors that do charge per permit. I had a guy in court, he was unlicensed. I put him in jail because he was just bad. He told me in court that he was going to charge $5,000 per permit because if the homeowner was going to pay it, he was going to take the money from him. He couldn't even obtain permits because he wasn't a licensed contractor in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Okay? So again, you want to make sure that you have all this information before you sign these contracts. And again, it's not to scare you, but again, I hear the horror stories practically every day, so I'm trying to impart wisdom to you all. Enforcement actions against the contractor for code violations become more difficult if a permit is issued to the homeowner. The code, the building code that Fairfax County enforces through Virginia, that gives us the authority. The homeowner is ultimately responsible for any work that is done in the home. But we also, in the code, do have a provision that allows us to take any enforcement action against the contractor. Now, we have had situations where the contractors have filed bankruptcy and have left the state. We had a contractor who took money and left the country. So it does happen. It's not very often. But again, you want to make sure that you're doing your best to, and again, it's very difficult to hire a contractor. I'm not saying it isn't, but you want to make sure that you kind of do what you can up front to know what you're getting into and try to avoid some of the pitfalls that other homeowners that, have fallen victim to. The county will verify the contractor's property license as required by state and local laws. So again, we're going to talk about the Department of Professional and Occupational Regulation in a little bit. They license all contractors in the Commonwealth. They also, as I stated earlier, license engineers and architects. So all that information is available on their website. To repeat the question, he's asking about number 3. So does this mean that the contractor is responsible, the homeowner is responsible? What basically flesh it out a little bit more is what you're asking. So he's asking, is the verification that the county does, are they doing it both for the contractor and the homeowner? The answer is yes. So our plus system, which I'll go over in a little bit, the plus system, if a contractor is entered into the system, we are going to check to make sure that they can get the license, or get the permit. So for example, if you're building an addition, they cannot build an addition using a home improvement contractor designation on their license, or HIC. They have to have a residential building contractor, RBC. So yes, we are confirming that on the DPR website through PLUS. The homeowner, yes, we are making sure that the homeowner is in fact the homeowner that we have in our tax records. And we use the Department of Tax Administration for that information. So he's asking if he decides he wants to be the owner's contractor, the primary contractor of record, which you're allowed to do as a homeowner. Can I enforce on the contractor I hire to do the physical work? Can I enforce that he do it under the code? Yes, and also remember, there's also going to be inspections with those permits. So the inspections are going to have to be scheduled in our plus system. And now I will tell you, as of right now, currently, our contractors and homeowners can actually apply for permits under the 2018 code through January 17th of 2025. We're in the grace period that Virginia allows us to be in. After January 17th, all permits have to be issued under the 2021 code. So right now, we're kind of in this, you can get it under the 2018, you can also get it under the 2021. But as of January 17th of 2025, it's mandatory that it has to be under the 2021. So yes, you can obviously help enforce that. Our inspectors would also, because when they pull up the permit, when they come to the house, they're going to know what code it's under, because they're going to look at the permit and say, okay, it's 2018 or it's 2021. Okay? Okay, so which class ABC? So Virginia has 3 classifications of licenses. And what has to happen is they have to go through a testing process. They have to take an 8-hour business course in order to be a contractor in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And again, making sure that they're not going to cause any harm to the public, because again, we want to make sure that there isn't any harm caused to the public. Class A is a project to the total values, which is $120,000 or more. So these are going to be your new homes, your bigger additions. We have had decks that have been over $120,000. So your bigger construction projects, they have to have a Class A. You want to make sure that if they're doing any exterior work, deck, additions, big sheds, pools, pool houses, that they have the RBC, or the Residential Building Contractor license. They cannot do additions, pools, any bigger construction projects without the RBC, the Residential Building Contractor license. Class B is those projects that are valued between $10,000 and $120,000. So they're going to be typically your decks, your finished basements, your sheds. If you don't get one, I guess now you can buy tiny homes on Amazon. We learned we did a community outreach event a couple weeks ago. So there's a lot of, and you can actually buy sheds at Costco. So as long as it meets the requirements, you can most certainly do it. But again, if they're actually going to build it, it has to be between 10,000 and 120,000. We do have contractors who try to be slick, and they try to do 2 contracts, one for material, one for labor. Doesn't matter, especially for Class C, it has to be within that price range. It can't be, you can't separate the contracts. And then Class C, those are your what they call handyman, between 1,000 and 10,000. You know, they're doing probably painting, they're probably doing some construction, maybe a small deck, patio. So again, making sure that they in fact have that license. And just as a note, Class C contractors, they're supposed to be licensed with Fairfax County. We have a code section that requires Class C contractors who do work in Fairfax County to be licensed additionally by the county in addition to their license with the Department of Professional and Occupational Regulation. Okay? And you also want to make sure that if you hire a contractor that they are insured and bonded, because if there's ever a problem, you need to make sure that you can make a claim with their insurance company, because we've had that happen. And no, there is no, Virginia nor Fairfax County keeps any type of insurance or bond information on the contractor. So possible unlicensed contractor kind of red flags that we see, especially when I handle some of the complaints. The reluctance to obtain a permit. That sometimes is a red flag that they may not be licensed. A contractor asking you to obtain the permit. That is sometimes a key that they may not be properly licensed. Or they'll tell you it's less than red tape, it's cheaper. The permit fees are the permit fees. It doesn't matter if you're a contractor or a homeowner. Like I said earlier, there are contractors who will charge money to obtain the permits as kind of like an administrative fee is what I've been told. Again, that's up to you if you want to do that. The homeowner gets the permit themselves, and then they basically act as their own general contractor. But that's a personal decision that you all would need to make for your individual families. Okay? And then a contractor requests an affidavit granting authority to obtain a permit in your name. Sometimes that is a red flag for us that the contractor may not be licensed. Okay? And then just to note, the website is here and the phone number to the Department of Professional and Occupational Regulation, the license lookup. Sometimes it's a little quirky when you type in the name if you don't type it correctly, because sometimes they have ampersands or they have periods like, LR something, or, just thought of one. But yeah, it's better, it's easier if you have the license number. You can do it with the name, but sometimes it may not pop up if it's not typed as it appears on their license. Okay? So what I tell people is if you can't find it online, call the phone number just to be sure, so that you can make doubly sure whether or not the contractor you're intending to hire is licensed or not. Okay? All right. Okay. So there's some tips to hire a contractor. These actually were provided by the Department of Professional and Occupational Regulation. You want to hire only licensed contractors, again, insured and bonded. You want to check the status of the contractor license. You would be surprised how many homeowners do not do this, and then they come to us for help, and we try to help them. But again, it's very important because it's your money that you're giving them, and you want to make sure that, that they're licensed. You want to get 3 references, review past work. Some people find that important, some don't. That's really a personal choice. You want to get at least 3 estimates or 3 bids. That's what some people do. You want to get a written contract and don't sign anything until you completely understand the terms. Virginia is a pro-business as opposed to pro-consumer, so you want to make sure that you understand. Some contractors won't do mediation. You have to go to arbitration. You may not be able to go to court. So again, you want to make sure in the event something goes awry with, the job. They recommend that you pay 10% down or $1,000, whichever is less. Now, I know in Fairfax County, that's difficult. What we say is maybe 30%. Want to decide how you want to do supplies, if you want to pay for them yourself or if you want them to go and pay for it. Some contractors will actually take their customer to the lumber yard or to where they buy their supplies and they pay for them directly. So again, you just need to work out those details, whatever is most comfortable for you. You don't want to let payments get ahead of the work. You want to keep record of payments. Some people even go so far as to put it, if you're writing a physical check, I know it's a foreign concept, but there are people that still write checks. They put it in the memo of what it's for, like, payment number for drywalling or whatever it is, just again to keep track of your payments. You don't want to make the final payment until you're satisfied with the job. And I would also add making sure that it passes final inspection by the county if a permit is required. Okay? Because some people are told that it passes inspection and then they call me and I tell them that there's been no final inspection. Or in some cases, there's been 0 inspections at all and they trusted the contractor. So again, you have to sometimes go behind even the professionals you hire. We recommend that you don't pay cash. We do have people that pay cash. It's up to you, but we just recommend that you don't. And then you want to keep a job file of all papers related to your project. You can actually get the permits online through the PLUS system so that you can have a paper copy. Technically speaking, you want to have your permits, the paper copy posted on the door. That helps our inspectors try to find the house. And also it is part of the code. I mean, we're not going to ding you for it, but it does help our inspectors try to find your house if they've never been there before. You can ask the contractor to provide them a certificate from their insurance company about proof that they are insured, because most of the time that certificate will have a date when the policy expires so that you have that information. And I know it's extra work for you all, but again, this is your investment that you're protecting, and you want to do everything humanly possible to make sure that you're doing what you can. Now, there's no guarantee that you're still not going to find a contractor who's not what you thought he or she are. But again, you want to do what you can to protect yourself. Okay? Any other questions or comments before we move on? Okay? So the permit process. Okay. So PLUS. PLUS stands for Permitting and Land Use System. This is a central platform that basically you can create and submit applications. First, have to start with a building permit if you're doing building, or you can also do if you need a building permit, you have to get the building permit first before you can get the electrical, plumbing, and mechanical if you need those trade permits. If you're just, for example, replacing a water heater, you can just actually get a household appliance permit or a mechanical gas permit. So again, just making sure that you familiarize yourself with the system. In order to start using the system, you're going to need to create a username and password. You're also going to have, they're also going to have you do a recovery, a question like you would for any of your accounts. Again, if you forget your password, so that we know that someone's not trying to, get into your account. So it's a safety measure, all right? Moving on. Okay, so this is an example when you log in, okay? So this is what you'll see. So register for an account is up on the upper right-hand corner. If you've never been in the PLUS system before, this is where you're going to create your account, okay? And they'll ask you username, they'll ask you to confirm your username, your password, they'll ask you to confirm your password. I just did this the other day for a customer, I was helping her. And then it'll ask you for a security question. And it'll ask, you have to create the question. And you create the answer, and you make sure you write it down safely somewhere so if you need it again, and you don't want to forget, okay? So this is the screen. The different tabs on the top here, or middle top. Building is where you would actually apply for a building permit. Enforcement is where you would file a complaint. We take complaints. There's different departments that deal with complaints. Environmental health, that's our health department. Fire, planning, Department of Planning and Development. Site is actually part of Land Development Services, our Site Development and Inspections Division. And zoning is part of the Department of Planning and Development. Any questions? Okay. Okay, so this is the dashboard. So if you start applying for permits, it would be here in your cart. Okay, so this is where you would keep track. If a building permit needs plans, there are some deck details. We have more if we run out. Some people elect to use our deck detail because they don't have to pay for plans. And as long as you follow the deck detail, you can apply for your permit saying that I'm building a new deck or I'm replacing a deck and I'm doing it per county detail. And that helps a lot of people. But again, the caveat is you have to follow what's in there. Any variation would require you to submit a plan, okay? We also have one for retaining walls, carports, finished basements, and I'm sorry? Wall bracing. And wall bracing. We don't get that too often, but I mean, I know commercial does, we don't. So, all right? Any questions about this screen? Okay? So when you want to create an application, as I stated, you would go to building. If you're doing residential, you want to do residential because obviously, so that's this screen. And then this is where you get to choose the residential types. So there's appliance, addition, alteration, the demolition, electrical, mechanical, residential miscellaneous. That could be a household appliance for replacement of water heaters or furnaces. Residential new, that's building a new home. Plumbing, residential retaining wall that we talked about earlier, and then the solar. Even though the fee is suspended for the next year and 1 day, you still have to apply for a permit if you do solar. If you set up an account, if we go back to the screen previous, this is where you can keep track of the permits, because some contractors have lied to our homeowners and have said, oh, I've applied for a permit. Well, if you have an account and it's linked to your address, you're going to see that there aren't any permits there. The question is, can you, if you've done it already and you don't have a permit, can you apply for it after the fact? The answer is yes. I would strongly recommend you do it before someone files a complaint, because we have a whole department, Department of Code Compliance, that deals with zoning complaints, unpermitted construction, and there are neighbors that do file complaints on other neighbors. And I have a prime example, my father. He will go, he used to, he doesn't do it much anymore, but he would go around and he would file complaints about people who weren't doing what they were supposed to do. And there are people like that in the county. That's why I have had the career that I've had. So, okay. Did anybody else have any questions before I move back? And I apologize, I wanted to make sure that we answer that question. And they've been some really great questions, thank you. Any questions of this particular slide? So the question is, if you pick, you said addition, correct? Okay, if you pick addition, will it tell you you need electrical, plumbing, and mechanical? I don't believe so. So when you apply for the building permit, it's going to just be the building permit. So you're going to need to know, once the permit is issued, that you're going to need the trades, because we're not going to know unless you call in for an inspection. Now, there are people who don't realize they need the different trades, and so unfortunately, they'll call in for the inspection and the inspector will fail it because they don't have the trade permits. Okay, so the follow-on question is, well, if it's on my plans, it's depicted as electrical and plumbing is needed. In a perfect world, we would catch that, but sometimes we don't. So it's going to behoove you to know what permits you're going to need. Now, again, if you don't get the trade permits and our inspector comes out and they see that electrical and plumbing, concealment's been done, they're going to make you get the permits before they'll even pass the building framing inspection. And again, there is no fee as long as the work is depicted on the electrical permit that is for a car charging station. If it is not depicted, you will be charged for the permit. So it's very important that you put the scope of work so that our permitting technicians will know that it is what the program is designed to do for the next year. So next slide is, this is a cheat sheet that was put together by our department about, so this is residential, kind of telling you what permit to apply for. So for example, the residential new includes a new single family dwelling, new townhouses, a detached structure such as carport, garage, accessory structure, gazebos, greenhouses, pool houses or sheds, and then the residential addition alteration has a number of jobs as well, again, to try to help you navigate through the PLUS system when you're applying for a permit. Okay, demolition, solar. The miscellaneous includes the roof. It also includes the household appliance, areaways, asbestos abatement. We still have asbestos in Fairfax County, unfortunately, so there is a permit needed to remove asbestos. Chimney reliner repair, because there are chimneys that need repairs, foundation repairs. So that's all included in the residential miscellaneous. And then if anybody's in the commercial world, it breaks down what is needed for the commercial permits. Okay, so the permitting process. Okay, so this is kind of a guide. So you must apply for a permit using PLUS, and plans are clearly illustrate the nature of all the work to be performed. Now again, some permits may not need plans. Roofing, new roof, or roof replacement does not need a permit, or excuse me, does not need plans, it needs a permit, sorry, unless, like I said earlier. The deck detail, you can use the deck detail in lieu of a plan, so there are different ways to maybe not need a plan, but if you need a plan, it needs to be labeled, and we need to clearly know what you're going to be doing. The scale for plans, this is on here, it's 1/8 inch for 1 foot per commercial, 1/4 of an inch, 1 foot for residential. So there are scales that are sold on Amazon that you can use, and that's what we use in order to measure the scale that you all use. But if you don't need plans, you don't have to worry about it. If you do, then, and you don't feel comfortable, there are draftspeople that homeowners have hired. Some homeowners, like I said earlier, hire architects and engineers, or engineers, depending on the situation. The code year used for design right now, I told you all earlier, 2018 or 2021, we need to know which one. If we don't know, we assume it's going to be 21, just so you know, until January 17th of 2025. So in this next, probably what, 3 months, 2 months, 2.5 months, you want to make sure that we know what code section you all, or code year you want to use. We need if plans are being submitted by a professional, we need the name, address, and occupation of the building designer. Again, engineer, architect, or draftsperson. If it is prepared by a registered architect or professional engineer, the plans have to contain an embedded digital signature, seal, and date. Most of the ones here in Northern Virginia know that about Fairfax County. If they don't, you can show them the slide if you need to. And then the project name and address of the building. So his question is, can a homeowner put together a plan? The answer is yes. Can the homeowner put all this information? Yes. I mean, obviously they're not going to seal it, the homeowner, but yes, they can put the rest of this information, yes. But they have to put, but you would have to put your name and that you're the homeowner so we know who designed it. And some homeowners do very well about their, submitting their own plans. Others don't want to do it. I myself would not. I would let my engineer husband do it, so. Okay. So the permit process, review and issuance. If it's any exterior work, a plat or survey has to be submitted. Most of us would have received a plat when we bought the home. If the plat has been used, I think it's twice, you may have to have a land surveyor do an updated plat, and that is going to be an expense to the homeowner. So just want to make you all aware of that. You want to submit the application. Again, it's all online, the drawings and the plat. The permit technician would review it. They would then charge you fees in plus. You would pay those fees in plus. You can pay them by credit card or by electronic check. Obviously, the system's not going to accept cash, so just want to make you aware of that. And you could come in and actually pay by check. That would be through our cashier's office, but a lot of people like the convenience of paying online. Typical reviews for most of the permits are zoning, site, building, health, and wastewater, especially if you're getting into the wastewater system. If everything goes well and everything passes the reviews, the permit is issued, and then once you're ready for the inspections, inspections would be scheduled, all done in the PLUS system. Zoning has told us that if the plat has been used 2 previous times for other projects, for example, if you did a new deck or you put in a new patio, because it's drawn, like a lot of people will do a hand drawing, they may require you to get a new plat if it's been used with a lot of handwriting on it. And that's a zoning requirement. That's not land development services. We're just the bearer of bad news. Okay. But they will let you know once you submitted the plat electronically if they're requiring a new one or not. Okay. So house location plat, this is kind of an example of what one looks like. If it's a townhouse, it's still going to be like this. If you're in a condo, it's going to be different because obviously it's multifamily use. So house location plat has to be clear and legible. Has to show the entire parcel and show all property line bearings and distances. Again, the setbacks that I was talking about earlier, zoning needs to know that because they need to know how far you're away from neighboring properties. Be drawn to a designated scale no larger than 1 inch equals 50 feet. And again, there are scales that the land surveyors use that you can actually buy on Amazon. You want to show the existing and proposed structures properly identified, accurately located and dimensioned, and drawn to the designated scale. Because again, they're just going to take that ruler and they're going to measure to make sure that you're approximately within the setbacks so that the zoning review can be approved. Because there are some people that try to build right up to the property line and they can't do that. It's not allowed. And then I will answer this question that I get a lot, is what happens if there's a property line dispute? The answer is the county does not deal with property line disputes, and we have had homeowners sue other homeowners about property line disputes, specifically trees and fences. And then the plat has to be signed and sealed by a licensed professional in accordance with the Virginia Administrative Code section that is listed on the slide. So the question is, does a fence need a permit? So it used to be that if a fence is 6 feet or less, it does not need a permit. I believe now you don't need a permit for a fence unless it is over 6 feet tall and it's not wood, but if it's concrete or another material. And that's at its lowest point to its tallest point. That's how it's measured. And then, of course, the zoning ordinance does allow certain size fences for noise remediation. If their house is right up against the parkway, they do allow for those fences, obviously, because they're trying to reduce the noise. So, okay. All right. So this is an example of the permit. This is what would be issued once it's approved. And you should, what I stated earlier was that if you set up an account, you should be able to get a copy of this permit. Contractors may or may not send it to you, so you want to make sure that you have the information because it is your home. And I have no problems if I'm contacted. I send out permits. Again, I confirm it's the homeowner because that's required. But as long as I know it's the homeowner, I will send permits to the homeowner if they can't get them from their contractor or if they're having difficulties navigating through the PLUS system. Okay, so the question is, if I obtain a permit and I don't use it, then you need to reapply. Technically, the code says yes, but if there's even a failed inspection or if you do an amendment or if you do a plan revision that does create activity, we typically don't void out permit. Our goal is to try to get the projects done as quickly as possible. Obviously, as I stated earlier, there's usually, or in some cases, extenuating circumstances. For example, like I said, the contractor has left the job, there's been a dispute with the contractor, the homeowner's going to hire a contractor, but they're suing the first contractor, so there's all those different varying circumstances that come up. But yeah, I mean, we're not going to void it out, but if the system does not allow you to schedule an inspection, then you are going to probably need to get a new permit. Okay? All right, any questions? Okay. So the posting of the permit, I mentioned that earlier. Approved submission documents, so the inspectors want to see the plans. And even if you're doing, for example, the deck detail, they want you to have the deck detail on site as well so they can look at it. So you want to have those documents there on site for inspection scheduled. And then the permit is valid for 6 months from the date of last activity. And like I said, that could be, you know, a failed inspection, that could be a past inspection, that could be an amendment, that could be a plan revision. That's activity to the permit. Or you applied for an electrical permit, or you applied for a plumbing permit if there are trades needed. Okay, so what he's asking is, so if I hire a professional to put together a deck detail, then I need a copy and, you know, or he's got to provide a copy. Absolutely. It just needs to be on site for the inspection because the inspector has to look at the plan to make sure that the plan meets what is built out in the field. Yes, sir. You do not. Okay. All right. Any other questions about this screen? Okay. So inspections. It is the permit holder's responsibility to schedule the inspections, and the inspections must be scheduled through the PLUS system. Okay, so if you, like you said earlier, if you're the owner as contractor, it would be your responsibility to schedule the inspections. But I will tell you that there are subcontractors, especially those that do furnace replacements or water heaters, where they expect the homeowner to schedule the inspection because they don't know their schedule. So you may have to make sure if you're having any type of appliance work, you know, replacement or new appliances that require permits, to make sure that those inspections are done and scheduled. So again, it's your home and you got to protect the investment. All right. Okay, so this is how you would schedule the inspection. You would go to building, you would go to record info, and you would select inspections. Now, if you are not listed as an applicant or a contact on the permit, I don't believe you can schedule the inspections. So again, that's a decision you need to make with your contractor in the beginning to lay out, you know, the plan of attack, so to speak, of how you're going to get these inspections once the permit is issued. Is the contractor going to schedule it, making sure that you're going to be home? If an inspector is locked out, they're going to leave for the day and it has to be scheduled for another day. So someone's got to be on site, to, especially if it's an interior inspection, to allow the inspector in the house. We just can't go into the house. We've had people ask us, well, what happens if I leave the key? No, we cannot go into an unoccupied house. We have to have a homeowner present, and they have to be over the age of 18. Because we've had teenagers try to let us in and we're like, no, again, for safety purposes, we need to make sure that the person is over the age of 18 for an inspection. Okay? Any questions? All right. Okay, what is needed for the inspections? Ladders, scaffolding, other equipment necessary to access the construction must be provided to the inspector. So either the contractor is going to have to provide it or the homeowner. Okay. And then please ensure the approved building plans, like I mentioned earlier, site-related plans and shop drawings are also on site and are available for review by the inspector. Okay, inspection. They are required for each phase of construction. So if you're getting a deck done, typically the inspections for a deck include a footing inspection before the footers are concealed, framing, and final. So those are usually the 3 inspections for a deck. Usually for the trade permits, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, that's usually a concealment inspection and final. And a lot of people forget to call in the final, so that's why I'm emphasizing final, to make sure that the permit is in fact closed. Because I've had to break the news to homeowners that they have like multiple open permits and they had no idea. And it's an easy problem to solve, but we just have to make sure it gets solved. Especially when people are trying to sell their houses, they're trying to get everything done in a short amount of time. So again, we're just trying to alleviate people's frustration and anxiety if, stuff hasn't been buttoned up before the, sale of the house. All right. And then for new houses, the final inspection marks completion of project and grants permission to occupy. A new house will require a certificate of occupancy. So if you're building a new house, in order to legally live in the house, you have to have a certificate of occupancy. If you're building an addition, it does not need a certificate of occupancy. It doesn't need a new one. It just needs the final approved inspection to occupy that addition. So a covered screen porch needs a permit, absolutely. Because I'm assuming for a porch also you may need some electrical. I'm going to take a wild guess. Maybe I'm wrong, but yeah. So it's going to need building and electrical if electrical is added. So additional resources. These are the different websites that you can go to get information. There's the Plan to Build website that helps you with information about building certain structures in the county. Planning and Development, again, they do a lot of the zoning reviews. Also, if you need special permits, variances, air and building locations. A lot of people don't realize that if they don't meet the zoning ordinance that they may have to ask for forgiveness instead of asking for permission, which would be done by the Board of Zoning Appeals. It's a long process, just so you know. Consumer Protection, they handle complaints of consumer issues, which I mentioned earlier. Plus, which is we've been talking about, this is where the permitting happens in that system. And then again, to verify if the contractor's licensed, just to reiterate, this is the website and this is the phone number if you need to call. Okay? Okay, other helpful numbers. So we have our customer experience team. They take calls for the building permit branch, as well as site permitting staff. Planning and Development have their own phone number. Building Plan Review is also, and residential inspections can all be reached at the same number. The Department of Code Compliance, they're on the 10th floor of this building, Heritage Building that we are in, and that's their number if you want to file a complaint, or you can also do it online that we discussed earlier. Health Department, if there's septic or any type of system that the health department's involved with, they will need to be involved if you're getting a permit, especially if we've had instances where people have built systems too close to the septic systems and the health department doesn't allow for that. So just to make you aware. Wastewater, again, there are wastewater structures in people's yards. So again, just making sure that your construction will not disturb that. VDOT, the Virginia Department of Transportation, if you decide to make a new driveway or cut into the road, if you're getting a sewer lateral pipe, replaced, they need to be contacted because you need a permit in order to cut onto their road. A lot of people don't know that, so. Some contractors don't know that. So we're letting you know. Okay, and then Consumer Affairs, or they're also known as Consumer Protection, that's their phone number as well. This is a system called Land Development Information History. It's available. It's a public website. It's on our county Land Development Services website. And people use this to look up addresses. So there are people, like I mentioned earlier, that will file complaints. They'll go to this to see if there are permits. So people know if there are permits or not, because if they know the address, they're going to be able to get the permit history. So the history of this particular website is there's, I believe, over 1 million records for addresses in the county. Some of them go back as far as the mid-'80s. So we're talking about a 40-year time frame. So you can look, when you get home, if you get a chance, later on this weekend, whatever, you can pull up your address by putting in the address, pressing the submit button on the bottom right, and seeing what your permit history is for your property. And a lot of people use this for different reasons. They want to know what has already been permitted, what may need to be permitted. If they get in trouble, they want to know what's been done. Real estate agents use it because they want to know if their client has to get a permit before they sell their house, like I mentioned earlier. So there are different uses for this system, and it's pretty easy to use. So the question is, if you use this system, will it pull up previous plans and records? No, it will not. So we and the county are only required by the Library of Virginia to keep plans for 3 years. So if a house was built 50 years ago, we're not going to have the plans. And that we do get that question quite a bit. Well, do you have the plans for my house? No, we don't, unless it's within the last 3 years. Okay, so his question is, if I keep, so this is for a deck, if I keep everything, the railings, the stairs, the footings, but I'm only replacing the floorboards, do I need a permit? The answer is yes, because can you walk on that deck if there are no floorboards? Gets them every time. Okay, so if you're doing egress, so for example, people they do stairs for, not for a patio, for example, but egress for going into their house. So technically, if you only have 3 stairs, you don't need a railing. If you have 4 stairs or more, then you have to have a railing. That's the requirement for stairs. But for a deck, a railing is required if it is off the ground. And again, that's because of safety, because again, it's a fall hazard. If a child falls, not to say they could injure themselves, again, you want to have that railing there. And it's got to withhold 200 pounds. I did learn that the hard way myself one time. So, thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. Have a good day, and thank you for coming. Thank you.